You're watching Standing on Guard, and I have created first time with Professor Noah Midamba, who is an expert on defense and foreign policy, also the Vice Chancellor of KCA University, Dr. Apollos Machira, a criminologist from Egerton University. We have with us Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, an expert on conflict resolution, also on national security matters. We do have with us as well Dr. Simiyu, Werunga, who is the Director General of African Security Studies and Strategy. We continue pace with the conversation on what is happening in Lamu. Also, we do have with us Wanderi, who is Captain Collins Wanderi, is an advocate of the High Court and also a security analyst here on AM Live. Gentlemen, let's continue with this conversation on what is really happening in Lamu right now. We'll couple that with a lot of issues that we've seen also on the campaign trail as well, in regard to appointments of also the acting Cabinet Secretary of Ministry of Interior, which this is maybe raising questions with the NASA brigade regarding to, you know, the appointment of a Cabinet Secretary, saying there's a dark underbelly to this. But let's start with Lamu. The changing strategy with the Al-Shabaab militants right now. Why have they crossed over from Somalia to Kenya? And we're given to understand we have around 30 militants who are now in Boni Forest today. Let's begin with Captain Simiyu Werunga.
Okay. You know, there are many assumptions being put across for why Al-Shabaab has moved across. And some of the things we talk about, some people don't want to hear. You know, Boni Forest has been an insecurity place for a very long time. And the fact that the military established its base in Boni Forest many years ago because of banditry shows you that for a long time people have always seen Boni Forest as a haven because of its foliage, its topography, and the fact that it's completely difficult for you to be mobile in Boni Forest. So the reason why I suspect Al-Shabaab has moved to Boni Forest, one is because they seem to have recruited too many Kenyans who have local knowledge of the Lamu County, and therefore they are utilizing these boys and girls to target areas that they are very familiar with, to target roads that they are very familiar with. And the fact that they can morph into society at night, and in the forest they're in uniform, and during the day they can walk like you and I, makes it very difficult for our security forces to deal with these so-called Al-Shabaab militants. Number two, I think we took longer to realize that actually Al-Shabaab is changing its tactics from essentially a terrorist organization and morphing into an insurgent outfit. And the difference is this: when you move from terrorism, where you don't need to have a ground to operate from, into an insurgency, then you're trying to create space to plan, to organize, and to use that space to engage in forays into targets that you want to destabilize. And I think the fact that we took a long time for us to realize that this is a changing thing on the part of Al-Shabaab has led us where we are today. And I also believe the fact that the government created this inter-agency system and appointed a gentleman, I know, somebody of Syrian, to be in charge of the counter-terror activities in Lamu.
Yes.
Probably it might not be playing very well with security agencies, because we've seen in this country where we have rivalries between our security systems, security agencies, and the fact that the government created this inter-agency framework and put somebody who I think, and I have no facts on this, although he belongs to the old provincial administration system, it is not essentially a person from the security sector per se. And therefore, we must look at this in the total framework of how is it that this person, who I'm told has a direct budget to deal with matters of Lamu terror activities, has not been able to ensure that our security agencies are operating, to be able to ensure that our security agencies have been equipped to deal with that specialized area of Boni Forest. Because if you ask Wanderi here, the military is trained in several elements. You are trained to fight in the desert, you are trained to fight in the plains, you are trained to fight in forests, you are trained to fight in build-up areas. So why is it that it is so difficult for our military to take over these operations and be in charge, as opposed to them working with the police? Yet we know very well that if you classify Al-Shabaab as a terror organization, it's very easy for the president, who is a commander-in-chief, to declare Boni area a military operation and allow the military to take over this operation and be supported by the police. What we are seeing now, I'm not very clear, is that it's essentially a police operation with the support of the military. Mm-hmm. So to me, there are many things that probably have not been done right. And that's why Al-Shabaab, with recruitment of local Kenyans, has taken over Boni Forest, and we see what is happening. Lastly, we think because of the success of the military inside Somalia, yes, especially Kismayo and the southern part where our military is based, mm-hmm, maybe the pressure and the fact that the Kenyan defense has been on their neck after El-Ade and many other attempted attacks on our camps, maybe the space for Al-Shabaab to operate inside Somalia has been diminished, and therefore they've decided to cross over and operate within Kenya, which is not good for the country, because if we think Kenya is a fairly military power in the region, is a fairly strong economy in the region, Kenya actually has a say within this region. And when we take the analogy of how military powers never allow wars to be fought on their land, they always go and defend their territory outside their boundaries. To me, that is a serious lapse on our strategic thinking to allow Al-Shabaab to come and fight within our boundaries.
Within our borders. So yes, where is the laxity? Because initially we had deployed all these security agencies within Boni Forest. Yes. For the longest time, we've deployed resources there, but yet we have a camp of the militants, 30 of them we don't know. That's the number that now is in the public domain right now. We don't know how many there are inside there. So where could have the security lapse, really emerged? And how do we have them camping within Boni Forest? We are not saying they're camped because nobody has told us they're there. But the fact that they're using... is in the public domain right now, according to media reports, they're camping there, the militants, and especially women who have been recruited. You say yourself that we have Kenyans who have been recruited. So we don't know if it was a crossover or it was an internal recruitment that we have from the country.
This is what I want to say. You see, camping from a military perspective, police perspective, is subjective. When we say camping, sometimes people will think they have built up a camp, they have admin. What I'm trying to say is they are now using Boni as their base. Not necessarily with any established structures, but the fact that they can roam within Boni, lay forays into our targets, and come back and hide in Boni, that was a lapse on our part. Why do I say that? Because if we have good strategies in our security systems, then there's something we call a scenario development. You develop a scenario about the people you are fighting. You develop a scenario that within these 6 months, what will be Al-Shabaab be doing in order to continue to perpetuate the ideology and fighting.
Yes.
Number two, we must look at it in terms of, if we have defeated them in Somalia, we know they've been recruiting Kenyans. What will be the next step? They are no longer capable of throwing grenades and blowing Westgate. What will be their next target?
Thank you. Right.
So to me, that is where, as a country, we need to be thinking, and that lapse must be taken up very seriously so that we rid these people from the Boni Forest.
Thank you, thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Mustafa, because we see a change of tactics, even the way they're executing people right now. Initially, we had, the bombs, or suicidal bombers, making sure they decapitate or they exterminate people who are around a certain area. But right now we can see the beheading. And recently we saw this was truly a hallmark of Islamic State. We understand that And recent report has it that Islamic State and now the Al-Shabaab, they've actually merged together, and the ideology of Islamic State now is with Al-Shabaab, with the beheadings. Is it now really confirming that, yes, they've taken a new venture and this is now the coalition between Al-Shabaab and Islamic State?
Yeah, Debarl, yes, there's a clear change of tactics in the way the Al-Shabaab is operating and the way they are even executing people. And that's the standard operating procedure for most of the terrorist groups, especially when they are under intense, not just surveillance, but also a military onslaught. Decapitating or beheading people. They're just applying the management of savagery that is the hallmark of groups like ISIS and others. But here's the thing, Debarl, with regard to the Kenyan security itself, is that we should have anticipated this, and it is still not going to get better, because it has not. If we look at countries like Afghanistan, when the coalition when the Operation Enduring Freedom went in Afghanistan, what happened is that the military machine of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda terrorists was degraded, diminished. But what happened? The fighters just, dispersed. And this is exactly what is happening in Somalia. Most of these fighters that had gone into Somalia, including Kenyans, those Al-Shabaab operatives that were recruited from Lamu, the coastal area, are basically coming back. And over and above the insurgency that Captain Simiyu Werunga is talking about, these groups, there's a new phenomenon of pansurgency. It's not just the Kenyans that are in that forest. Insurgency or insurgents tend to be pretty much internal, so it would be pretty much Kenyans. But the people that you have in Boni Forest, pansurgents, they come from around the world. We've seen Evans, one of the terrorists from the United Kingdom, was killed in Lamu area, and there are many others that are there. These pansurgents are tied together. They are glued together by a more globalized ideology that groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda put out there, and Al-Shabaab has been trying to get its recruits brainwashed, indoctrinated with this kind of ideology. So prevention, Debarl, we should have seen this coming. When we saw US failing in Afghanistan in 2005, 6, 7, until today they are still grappling with the Taliban, we should have been prepared and address the issue of recruitment, so that these guys don't recruit from among the Kenyan youth, or if they do, it's much more harder to do so. But they are still recruiting. Even today, there are many boys who left Isiolo, and some of them were arrested in El Wak. This is only last month. And a number actually managed to join Al-Shabaab. These boys will come back to this country to terrorize us. And this is what we have to focus on, besides the military onslaught, which seems to be working in other places, but is not working internally.
All right. Captain Wanderi, Jima village, 9 civilians be decapitated, change of tactics. What are your thoughts?
First, Debarl, I do not think we are dealing with Al-Shabaab per se in Lamu County. And I want to say things on air which haven't been said elsewhere, with some knowledge which I have regarding Lamu and the problem in Lamu. And there are 2 issues that are in contention. There's the issue of land as a grievance, and there's the issue of upcountry people who are majorly Christian squatters inside Lamu. That's the crux of the matter. Let me explain it this way. What we have in Lamu is not Al-Shabaab, and they are not direct attacks of Al-Shabaab, but a low-level insurgency which is operating under the cloak of Al-Shabaab and supported by Al-Shabaab elements, and using Islamic extremism as a basis to advance their cause in the fight for land resources. And let me explain it very slowly so that our viewers can get. Lamu West is earmarked for the development of an international airport. Lamu West is also earmarked for the development of a port, the second port in Kenya. Lamu West is also earmarked for the Kenweed Energy Project. The Lamu Standard Gauge Railway, the second line to Isiolo, will start in Lamu. The oil pipeline from Lokichar is destined for Lamu Port. There is also a coal plant earmarked for Lamu West again. And finally, you have the Lapset project in Lamu County. These projects were mooted way back in 2002. And when these projects were mooted, we had large speculators going to Lamu County. And between 2003 and 2007, 356,000 acres of land, which constitute almost 50% of the arable land in Lamu County, were expropriated into 6 ranches. Now, immediately this current government came into power, there were issues over who was allocated land in Lamu when the question of compensation for the projects I've mentioned became an issue. And how did this government react? This government reacted by cancelling the title deeds to the 6 ranches which had been given the 356,000 ranches. And the first act of defiance, or the first act of defiance against the state by local players, was in June 2014, June 15, 2014. This appears on my records for security analysis in Lamu County. And there was an attack in Hindi, Mbweketoni, and Poromoko area, which killed 75 people. And although it hasn't been reported, people who are on the ground know that the language the attackers were using on the squatters was, in Swahili, mtaondoka hapa mrudi kwenu, hii mashamba ni yetu. Now, why do I agree with Mustafa that the savagery being seen has an ideological basis? Because then for you to engage in this low-level insurgency and attract the support of the groups like Al-Shabaab, you then have to fight a war in terms of ideology on religion. And this is why the attackers have been using the words kafiri towards the mainly upcountry people who have settled in Lamu. And let us be clear on this matter, that when they attack the so-called squatters who are mainly upcountry people, they do not discriminate on the ethnicity. The main basis for them is the fact that you are Christian. And this issue of Lamu, if we have to resolve it, you have to resolve the land issue, and again, at the same time, you have to resolve what Captain Werunga said, securing our frontier. Lamu does not have such a big border around Kiunga with Somalia, but there is a point of entry through Garissa. And these militants have simply used this as a way, as a conduit for receiving arms and logistical support from across Somalia. Now, why do I agree with Captain Werunga? Because you cannot then have a civilian Operation Leader Boni has now ceased. It has now escalated from a civilian operation of keeping peace and maintaining law and order into an issue of defending the territory of the Republic of Kenya. And now it is high time the commander-in-chief then deploys the appropriate forces to defend the frontier, not the rural border patrol unit officers you have mentioned, the 7 of them. It is sad, and my colleagues have said it here, that we cannot be using, you cannot be countering a very ruthless force using resources that are do not have the capability to marshal them. And that is where we must then deploy the Kenyan Defense Forces in that area.
All right. Land being a very ticklish issue as well. We've seen President Kenyatta also taking, some of the sentiments that were said by Raila Odinga elsewhere in the country, I think in Kajiado, and also taking that particular sentiment when he was at the coast, and saying that, yeah, you've heard from some individuals that, yes, when they take over, also they'll want to take back, they'll chase you away from some of these settlements that you have, occupied for for many years. Looking also at the tone and tenor that we have in the country right now, every politician using any, sort of a fodder that he has, regardless of what it will do to the citizen or the settlers in those areas. How corrosive can this be? When we hear from Dr. Apollos. And you, first of all, espouse what was being said by the president using this particular sentiment, knowing where Peketoni has been before in regard to security issues.
I appreciate what the president said about that. I said it 2 weeks ago here on air. And when I said it, there was a lot of social media criticism about me. Yep. Then I also got private emails, some saying that they are coming for you. I tell you, come, baby, come. Because the president has said it, you are terrorists, you must go. Let me quote what the students, Pagani students, said yesterday. Your days are numbered. It is here on the Standard. Pagani girls yesterday want terrorists, tell ourselves to say openly the problem they have. What mistake have Kenyans committed? And if they have a genuine case, why the terrorists cannot seek solutions that are structured? Then they say, you cross the border, coming to shed blood, why don't you like peace? Why is peace out of your opinion? They wrote that letter to the king of terrorists. The king of terrorists is Caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdad. I don't know whether he's still alive. So if our students are now crying out, and we are crying out, and the president has cried out, I think we should go for these terrorists. We go to Boni Forest, we bomb the forest, we pour cholera and hot water so that everybody moves out. Any terrorist anywhere should be hunted down and killed and not even buried, like I said last week.
So you
then,
yes. So
then coming closer home, because the nearer the conflict, the more serious. For me, it's even worse because I'm in Laikipia. The other day I saw with my own, I witnessed livestock being stolen by people at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I saw them being driven away. And then there was nothing we could do because these people are armed and we could just watch them as they are driven off. The following day, the police came and they were killed, 6 of them, in a certain corner in a certain village during the day again. Then when the operation came, some people are now crying foul that people are being chased away. So I'm wondering, we allow our police officers to be killed by bandits, then they enter Laikipia Nature Conservancy, and we do not enter that place. I say these bandits, just like terrorists, should be hunted down, and they should be finished, because they killed the deputy commandant of the anti-stock theft unit and other senior police officers when they were coming to give guard, to stand on guard. So I'm saying any criminal should be treated the way Hammurabi the king was treating criminals, an eye for an eye. Terrorists are even worse because they are not killing one person, they are killing many people. So I think President Uhuru, for the first time you have spoken well. I encourage you, tell all these captains, including the retired ones like Werunga, to go to Boni Forest, and we finish this thing all through. Because they have the strategies, let them now be recruited and join us in the war against terror in this country. They should not be here on air giving us strategies. Giving us the strategy. They should go to the field and give practical strategies out there.
All right, let's hear from Professor Noah Midamba.
Debarl, this is a very, very complex issue that cannot be easily, there is no easy solution to this. Based on Captain Wanderi, a very, very good analysis on the situation. There is the land issue, and the land issue is much bigger than Boni Forest, much bigger than Lamu. We have a situation in Kajiado, which is evolving. We have a really serious situation in Laikipia, where Apollo is coming from. These are going to continue to be major national issues which we must address. Now, let me say this.
Ethiopia in regard to terrorism. Ethiopia has had a very successful deterrence against al-Shabaab. Ethiopia has a much larger Somalia population than Kenya has. Ethiopia has a much longer border than we have with Somalia. Ethiopia many times has penetrated inside Somalia and gone back to Ethiopia and has never experienced the kind of terrorist act which we face in Kenya. So what is it that they're doing better than we are? Mm-hmm. The other one is Uganda, next door neighbor, which is use a strategy which bring the Somalia community together, working very close with the security, both police and also the National Army, and providing very vital information about the hideouts and where the terrorists are. So here's what I'm saying, finally, citizen. The solution is for us to align our resources with the security strategy that reflect evolving security challenges which we have. That's number one. Number two, we need to adopt an interagency personnel system aligned to the new reality, not hit and run. That is not going to work. And third is to establish a very clear line of authority, responsible between security, what is closer to, in my opinion, which I've been calling for, homeland security in Kenya, which we need to create. And lastly, we cannot continue staying in Kismayu. You know, Kismayu is a Somali issue. I'm under Amazon. I agree the role and we are playing in there. We need to buffer the Kenya border. We need to protect Kenya border so that there are not easy infiltration back and forth. And unless we do that, we are going to continue having problems.
All right. If you may allow me to just take callers who were hanging on the line, if they're still hanging on the line. We have Cam hanging on the line. Good morning. Hello, good morning, Cam.
Morning.
Morning. You have a question or a contribution, Cam?
Yeah.
Please.
Actually, I was just wondering, because the gentleman mentioned earlier that about the budget that a certain individual has on, sorting out this issue.
Yes.
It's very simple. They should just send out drones and kill these people. Because drones will have a look from the air and we can see what these guys are doing when they're moving at night. And these drones take instructions and they finish people.
Yes.
I mean, that's so simple for KDF to do. Just get intelligence, send drones in the air,
yes,
have a visual from the air, who's moving at night in Boni Forest, and bomb them. Finish. Second opinion I quickly mentioned is these guys who are so-called returnees of Al-Shabaab. There is no way a returnee will not continue being a sympathizer with Al-Shabaab. So they have to be grilled and they have to be questioned about where were you guys working from. They have to be used to take these people back and show us the routes you people use, if it's through Garissa, if it's through Lamu. These people are returnees, yes. The government should not accept them with open arms. They are still, in my opinion, sympathizers of Al-Shabaab. But the government has been so kind and nice with all the returnees, our boys, and we have to accept them back. It's not acceptable. We have to ask the boys, what routes were you using? What logistics were you using? Because Al-Shabaab are eating and they're living. Where are these logistics coming from?
Right.
You understand? So I think the government should step up its game. And lastly, last but not least, in the Swahili saying, Kulacho Ingoni Mwako. These guys are working within us. We need to get the hold of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Khan. Right, of course, you raise a good point. We wonder also what really happened to the amnesty that was there. We remember also the elect Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior, mentioning that there is amnesty. But we've never been given also a blow-by-blow account of the amnesty program and how they were integrated back in the society. We have Otoa Sifuna hanging on the line. Good morning, Otoa.
Yes, good morning, Debarl.
Morning to you.
Yeah, this is Otoa Sifuna.
Yes, yes.
My friends call me Garam.
Yes, please.
I'm not a security expert, Debarl, you know that. I'm a Malimu, I'm a teacher. I deal with these youth.
Yes.
And one of the security experts are saying that much of the recruitment into al-Shabaab and these other groups is emanating from these groups, especially the high school students that we teach. Debarl, it's unfortunate that we are very good at policy. I think it's Dr. Apollos who attacked Werunga by saying that we are good at logistics and policy. They should leave the students go to Boni Forest. We are good at policy, Debarl. We talked of security studies in even high school syllabus.
Yes.
So far, it has not arrived. If we start teaching security studies to even as young and teach our young people the need to protect our country, we shall not go to this. There is also a national intelligence service in this country. War or any form of fighting cannot be won on combat. It is won on logistics and good planning. Where is the national intelligence service in this country? Because we just wake up one day, the al-Shabaab have attacked and they have killed our people. It's like we no longer learn from this al-Shabaab. Lastly, Debarl, recruitment and the vulnerability of our border. Because it has been said time and again that we need to retreat from Simiyu, we need to retreat from Somalia. It is high time that we listen. We cannot go on playing adamant when our people are dying, Debarl. It is high time that our soldiers came back and we leave Simiyu and say enough is enough.
Thank you.
This is Otoa Sifuna Garang from Nairobi.
All right. Thank you, Otoa Sifuna. Maybe you want to weigh in on that. I saw also Captain Werunga raising his hand before we took the callers. You had a sentiment to say. We didn't respond to that also as we're giving our closing remarks.
I'll respond later. But my worry is this. Students of
Pangani girls?
Terrorism
sorry.
are very careful when we start injecting new issues in national strategies to fight terrorism. It might be good what Captain Wanderi has said, but the moment we start changing our views and our thinking on terror and start talking about kafir, land issues, it can be very dangerous for this country. My suggestion to my colleagues is that we focus on terror, whatever the reasons behind that. The end game should be elimination of terror in this country. And because people listen to these programs. And yes, I know Captain Wanderi might be having views, which I know sometimes we share in private, but I don't think at the end of all this, what is happening in Lamu is about land. We know why these fellows have moved from Simiyu to Boni Forest. There's also this tendency of them now blowing up our vehicles and police officers along the border up to Mandera. So it's not really about Lamu per se, because you can see a narrative they're building up from Boni, Lamu, Kiunga, all the way Elwak up to Mandera. And Mandera is not part of Lamu, so it is not really the issue of land. I think we need to look at this very objectively and know that if you are morphing from a terror organization to an insurgency, the aim is to create space, to own space. And when you want to own space, you ensure that you terrify the locals, you terrify security agents, and you give government stretch their resources in a manner that they're not able to run around with you. So I think, to me, this insurgency issue, yes, they might want to use Boni Forest, the way I said, as their base in terms of operations, planning, and communication. But when you look at the narrative, the way they're now doing along our borders, is literally to create space where they can operate. And therefore, if we just stick to Lamu without relating with what else is happening, then I think we might be missing the point. That is one. Number two, I want my professor, you know, he's my professor in KCA. He talked about Ethiopia. And I think it's important we contextualize our two countries. Ethiopia is fairly a semi-dictatorship. Ethiopia's democracy is wanting. Kenya is a fairly good democracy, coupled with a lot of corruption and many other things. So when you look at Ethiopia, Ethiopia decimates opponents, whether they are terror opponents or they are political opponents. Kenya, we are a democracy. So the way Ethiopia has dealt with the terror in Zone 5, which is, it's called what, the other name? Ogaden. It's completely different the way we do it here. Because one, if you operate the way you do in Ethiopia, Kenyans will take you to court 100 times. And therefore it becomes a bit difficult for Kenya to apply the same tactics that Ethiopia has applied. So what do? The strategies that we are talking here, even if Machira Apollos wants us to go to Boni Forest, we must also share with the Kenyans what we think, is that we must come up with strategies of how we can eliminate these people from Boni Forest. Because the moment they set foot and settle in Boni Forest, it's like Sambiza in Maiduguri in Nigeria. The Nigerian government took so long to realize that this Boko Haram wanted to use Sambiza as their base, and by the time they went into Sambiza Forest, it was too late. So Kenya must learn, like I think you mentioned about us learning in Afghanistan. We must learn that Boko Haram and al-Shabaab, there's been talk that actually they've been relating. And therefore, we must be very careful what these people are after. And it's always good to strategize so that we don't muff up all these things and we have a place, like he said, turn this operation into a military operation, appoint a military officer in charge, and let everybody else work under the military.
All right, Dr. Mustafa.
Yeah, very quickly, Debarl, and I just want to agree with Captain Werunga. It's very important that the military takes over this operation in Boni Forest and try and get rid of those terrorists that have made Boni Forest their base. But we also need, and I want to repeat this, learn from the mistakes that have been done in the past. Not just military solution in itself is not going to end this problem. The Sambisa becoming a base for Boko Haram, the United States of America, the Ugandan army, and the powers around were tracking Kony for a very long time in the jungles of Central African Republic, South Sudan, northern parts of Congo. They actually had to call off that operation. And Kony is still alive somewhere operating in the forest. Yeah, it's not going to just bombing. It's not the clear or the most sure solution to address these issues. There must be a multi-pronged strategy. I don't have an answer for that. People have to go back to the drawing boards to come up with this strategy to address the issues of prevention, and those that have already taken up to arms address it in fighting those people.
All right, so what we had also, Commissioner Marwa really saying that, we should actually go and bomb them in the Boni Forest. That was wrong-headed, very briefly. Captain Wanderi?
Yes, it is the wrong strategy. You do not do that. And I want to appreciate one of our callers and our viewers this morning who said that we must have strategy, plan, and to win the war. I must also add to him that you win the war using a strategy, a plan, backed with logistics, as well as winning the war in the hearts and the minds of the people. Why do I say this? Because in Lamu, the attacks have not happened in Lamu East, that is Basuba, Kiunga, and Faza, which is closer to Somalia. The attacks have happened in Lamu West, which is the areas of Hidi, Mpeketoni, which are towards Tana River. And there is a reason why I appreciate that caller, because it means, for what my colleagues are saying, if we have a population inside Boni area or around Boni Forest that is complacent, that is giving aid and comfort to these militants, then they will set up base and it will be very difficult to remove them. So it's incumbent upon the state, apart from using military strategy, to also induce and infuse national sentiment into the people so that the people can support our forces to secure our territory.
Thank you. Let's leave it at that. Dr. Apollo, sorry.
For the National Intelligence Service, you should ask yourselves who inhabits Lamu West and who inhabits Lamu East, so that you know the dynamics. I think I should request the government to remove the General Service Unit, and remove administration police in Bond Forest, and take the Kenya Defense Forces, because we are dealing with insurgents from Las Gaboni across the border.
Thank you.
This is a border issue.
Right, thank you. Let's hear from Professor Noah Midamba.
Debarl, the U.S., in the case of Vietnam, bombed the entire forest for many years. They used Agent Orange to clear the forest. They maim and kill millions. At the end, Richard Nixon bowed out, and Johnson resigned from the office. The issue is not bombing. We must use our intelligent and skill and strategic approach to deal with the issue. It is much more complex than going in and dropping bombs. It does not work.
Thank you. Thank you. And